Tallgrass Film Festival. I am Delilah Reed, and I'm the assistant of social media, and I'm really happy that you could all be here today. I want to go ahead and thank our sponsor that is making this education panel possible, Cargill. Thank you so much. So this is the education panel that we're doing to discuss the Brown Project. We're going to go ahead and go around in a circle and have everybody introduce themselves. I'll start with myself. I know I said I'm Delilah Reed. Everybody here is in some way connected to Nick Brown. This is who we're discussing today. So I'll let you know that I was been a best friend of his since high school. We went to prom together, my first roommate, and somebody that weeks before he was gone, I spent a lot of time with him. And so I'm very, very close to him, and I'm very happy to be able to be helping moderate this panel and to be on this board and have this discussion with everybody. So thank you for being here. Naythan, welcome. Introduce yourself, please.
I'm Naythan Smith. I'm the projectionist coordinator with the Tallgrass Film Festival, and I'm also a good friend of Nick's. Did a lot of film stuff together, and prior to that, a lot of pen and paper RPGs, so just all around good friend and fellow filmmaker.
Thank you so much. Kylie, hello, welcome.
Hi, Delilah. My name is Kylie Fogler. I am the sister of Nick Brown. Known him my entire life. Growing up, we were very close, and again, into our adulthood, we were very close. I am excited to be part of this panel and to talk more about mental health and behavioral health awareness, and to kind of bring more awareness, like I said, but also to maybe release some of the stigma behind mental health.
Thank you so much for being here with us today. Ben and Kaitlin, hello, welcome. Could you go ahead and introduce yourselves for us?
Hi, yeah. My name is Ben. I am a licensed master level social worker and licensed master level addiction counselor. I have been a crisis therapist, an individual therapist, have worked in mental health quality and risk management, and currently I'm an integrated care consultant in a primary care setting. I applaud you guys for taking the time to have this important discussion, and although we didn't know Nick personally, this is a very important topic, and I think it's awesome that you're discussing it as part of your festival.
Hi, everybody. I'm Kaitlin Boger. I have my doctorate in education. I'm a licensed master social worker and a licensed master addictions counselor. I also work in integrated care, which is behavioral health mixed in with primary care. So you go into your doctor, your optometrist, your dentist, that kind of thing, which Ben and I are very passionate about, making sure people get immediate access to behavioral health care, and think that's a great way to open up kind of the world to behavioral health. One thing we want to make sure everybody is aware of listening today is our discussion could be a little bit triggering for some individuals, including those who have attempted to complete a death by suicide, those who know someone who's died by suicide, individuals with a tendency towards depressed feelings, and individuals with a history of trauma or abuse.
Guys, thank you so much for being here today and sharing your knowledge and taking time to help us build this community better. Kate, could you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Kate Gondwe. I'm a filmmaker, and I was a part of the EPA program, a program that many Wichita filmmakers, including Nick Brown, were a part of in providing mentorship to the younger film community here. And so we collectively, through this project, are honoring Nick and his contributions to our community. And then through this panel that was supposed to be used as a way to just further educate our community on this important issue, because it's something that we all face. And so I'm just glad to be here and coordinate that.
Thank you so much. Welcome. And Kate, I just want to go ahead and start in with a quick question to you. We're discussing the Brown Project. Could you tell us a little bit more about it, how it came about, and what we're doing with it in the future?
Yeah, so Kylie Fogler, Naythan Smith, Delilah, and everyone here are a part of this program that we put together that basically would provide a mentorship and a database. We've had a few meetings over the time and collectively came together to decide what would best represent in honor of Nick would be to create a mentorship and community, because that's something that Nick was so strongly a part of, but also something that he contributed extremely to. And so we want to give back to Nick by doing this. And so we want to celebrate him and also celebrate the wonderful talent he had as a creative and as a filmmaker. And so today we're also going to talk about that as well.
Thank you so much. So I'm sure a lot of people are going to be watching this panel that haven't met Nick or know Nick, but something that's really left a powerful mark on us is his desire to do mentorship and to share his skills and encourage and lift others up. That's what he really did amazingly as a creator. And I think that we've all in some way definitely have leaned on him in our times of need and also have taken away something and grown because of him. So his presence is definitely missed at this time. And I just also want to toss out there that we are here we're going to have a discussion. We're also going to bring up Nick probably a bunch because he's the reason we're here. And I want to keep this a nice discussion, and if you feel like popping in, everybody feel welcome, ask your questions as if they come up, and feel like this is a safe space for all of us. And that I also want to mention, Nick was very, very, to me at least, to lots of friends, it was not a secret that he was dealing with depression for years. And I think we're thankful as a community that he used his filmmaking to raise a light on depression and suicidal thoughts. And he was, not shy about it. And because of that, we knew and we all tried to help. So feeling like maybe use your powers of filmmaking to access that feelings and let people know that you're not alone. So you're not alone, guys. So Kate, do you want to go ahead and lead in with some of the first starting questions, please?
Yeah, so one of the questions that we were discussing in our meeting was, in a time like right now where there's a lot of alone time and a lot of us are tending to just isolate ourselves, what can we do as individuals to just further maintain our mental health during this time?
Sure, I think that I can answer that or start to answer that. You're right. A lot of us are very isolated right now. We have our COVID-19 isolation. We have a lot of political turmoil in our country right now. There's lots of things that are keeping people away from each other and inside their houses. And many people who are part of this and many people who will be watching this have also lost someone, which can also be very isolating. You can feel very alone after a loss. And for some reason, one of the things that many of us do when we go through a tough time is to stop doing the things that make us happy, the things that are enjoyable to us and give our life satisfaction and meaning. And we sometimes we also tend to fall back on coping skills that aren't healthy. And so one of the first things that I encourage people to think about when they're going through a rough time is anyone that you can reach out to, whether it's to talk about something of mutual interest or specifically to discuss, hey, I'm going through a tough time. Just social interaction with someone else, even over a Zoom conversation or a phone call, even a text message can mean a lot to someone when they're feeling down. And so lots of times it's up to the person who's feeling down to reach out. But also if you have someone in your life that you haven't heard from a while, especially someone that you think may be prone to depression, it wouldn't definitely not hurt to reach out to them and make sure that they're doing okay. You might even make yourself feel better too, whether you realized you were feeling down or anxious or stressed or not. You might get some relief from that interaction as well.
Yeah, I think very frequently we don't reach out, like Ben said, when we're feeling down or depressed or anxious. Instead, we kind of internalize those things. And one of the things that I think we see a lot, and I do it myself, so I totally get it, is we talk to ourselves like we're our worst enemy instead of talking to ourselves like we're our best friends. And that is something that would really help. You know, if you're starting to do that process of the internalizing, I think you're usually talking to yourself like your worst enemy, right? And not like your best friend would. And so making sure that you try to reach out if you're feeling that way, but also reaching out to people that you haven't heard from. If you're you're one of those people in individuals' lives, it's important to feel connected, especially right now.
The other thing to point out is that it would be totally normal to feel depressed and anxious anytime. And especially so in a situation like COVID-19, where we're isolated in our houses, especially when there's lots of like political divisiveness that, makes it hard sometimes to have frank discussions with family members or friends or other people that you care about. Or when you've lost someone, it's completely normal. In fact, it's expected to feel depressed and anxious sometimes. And if you went through your life without feeling depressed and anxious ever, that would be concerning too.
Yeah.
And so part of our discussion around this topic just needs to be the normalization of it and the normalization of getting help for it. Whether that help is something that you do yourself individually to make yourself feel better. We call them coping skills in the professional community. These are things that are intellectually engaging, fun to do, socialization activities. As long as they don't hurt you and they don't hurt someone else, and they give you a sense of diversion or satisfaction or fun, it's a coping skill.
Yeah, and I think, if you walked outside your house and you tumbled over the steps outside and thought maybe I broke my pinky toe, you would probably go somewhere and get an x-ray of your pinky toe, right? But for some reason, when we're having a moment in mental health and we're like, gosh, I'm feeling really down and depressed and I don't feel good, our tendency is to say, you know what I think I'll do? I'll just keep feeling like that and stay in my house, which logically doesn't make sense, but we all do it. When we should do is reach out and try to get those connections and those supports. And I think that's what the people on the panel are trying to with today, and the big project that they're working on is how do we encourage those supports? How do we encourage that connection amongst people, especially in the film community that can be it can be a very isolating work.
Specifically what someone can do, it varies a lot by individual. Like I said, focusing on things that are fun or mentally engaging or social coping skills seem to be very successful for most of the people that I've spoken to. One thing that we definitely have noticed an increase in our clinic lately is generalized anxiety and panic disorder symptoms, just kind of this, almost like for many of our patients, a kind of like creeping dread that sneaks up on them sometimes.
It feels like it's out of nowhere, but it's just there, And
specific things that we can recommend to deal with anxiety like that, especially panic-like symptoms. We always have to give the caveat when we're interacting with people this way that this advice should not be considered a replacement for therapy or for being assessed to see if you need mental health treatment. But these are just some kind of general tips and tricks of things that can help with things like panic attacks when they pop up. My favorite one to explain to my patients is a combination of two techniques, because anxiety is both in our bodies and very much in our minds. And so it's kind of a two-pronged approach that can help you slow down your mental processes and slow down the physical processes that eventually can become extremely high anxiety or panic. And those two things together are a technique called boxed breathing and a mental technique called a grounding or anchoring technique. So they're pretty simple to do. I'm sure you've all seen someone breathing into a bag on a movie, they're having a panic attack. We don't want you to breathe into a bag. You can make yourself dizzy with carbon dioxide, I've heard doing that. It's more about the rhythm of breathing than it is about the specific depth or intensity of your breath. So I think we can all practice it here together. I can see all the panel members on camera, so I'll know if you're practicing. We're just gonna take deep breath in through our noses for 4 seconds, in for 4, and then out through pursed lips for 4 seconds. In through your nose, out through your mouth. So there's a mechanism in our body, our brains and our bodies are connected. Our brains feel anxiety and our bodies interpret it as danger, and they can get agitated. High levels of anxiety can trigger the fight or flight techniques or fight or flight response, which can be very distressing to someone who's having a high level of anxiety. So that breathing technique is kind of like manually changing the transmission on your body to slow it down a little bit.
Right.
Now, the second part of that technique is a mental technique called the grounding technique, which is very easy to do, but very powerful as well. It's where you just focus on your senses. Anxiety causes your mind to jump to the future. Many of us jump to worst case scenarios and what if situations. What if this happens? What if this happens? What if this happens? And of course, it's never the great, awesome outcome that we imagine. It's like the worst possible thing. How are we going to deal with it? The grounding technique can help you take some of that mental energy that your brain is spending on all that what if hypothesizing and focus it on what's going on right here, right now. And so we can practice it. Just be quiet for 15 seconds and see if you can hear 5 different things in your circle.
And I think this is something we talked about in our meetings, that we discussed that as artists, you're constantly thinking about the future. And it's a very scary thing because there's a lot of it's freelance work, which is uncertainty. So there's a lot of financial anxiety that a lot of people have. I think a lot of Americans have that right now. And so I think that's something that, that exercise is a really great help and can provide a relief throughout the day for someone. But I also think just like as an artist, like what can you do to, not just deal with it, but maybe put it in your work. And that's something that, Delilah mentioned Nick did. He put his own self in his work, which created action within his work. And so, many artists, that's a very hard thing to do. And that's the beauty of art, is that personalization to it, that custom signature on it. And so that's something that, many filmmakers do.
And I think that's an important thing that you just said, Kate, is being an artist has a piece of like giving yourself, and that can be very physically and emotionally exhausting to do that all the time. And I think that's another really important step that you guys have made with this Brown project, is when you're an artist, you're constantly giving pieces of yourself to make your work better, which is wonderful, but also probably exhausting. And acknowledging that and having other people acknowledge that is really important.
Absolutely.
So besides I think that we began discussing the sensory anxiety, and I will say, like, I have actually used that a lot, and it has helped me. Bawling, hyperventilating, can't breathe, can't think. It has actually helped ground me and helped my anxiety just stop and made me like start thinking clearly again and realizing that the world isn't falling apart right now and everything is okay. Were we beginning that example? Do you want to finish doing the example?
Sure, yeah. I mean, so you can do the same thing with all of your senses. I mean, we don't need to go through them all one by one here, but you can go through the list yourself, just making a list of 5 things that you can experience with all of your senses. Taste is hard unless you're in your kitchen, but you can really ground yourself anywhere at any time. And those combination of those 2 coping skills are definitely things that you can do anywhere, anytime, and no one will even necessarily know that you're doing them. So they can be extremely useful. The
one thing I tell people a lot is a lot of times people will get themselves in that panic moment, and that's when they'll think, oh, now I'm gonna do my box breathing now. How did he teach me how to do that? It's so important to practice those things when you're not in those moments, because then they'll be old hat to you. They're second nature now. Now there's something that I can do. I have a lot, and I know Ben does too, of people that put it on like a little index card or a Post-it and just put it in like their purse, so that if they're having a rough time, especially the grounding exercise, It's simple, but it is one of those things, unless you do it all the time, you know, it's hard to think like, okay, 5 things I smell or taste, which one, you know? And it doesn't matter, not really, but just having something to direct your mind logically in those moments is really helpful, because that's when your mind is kind of getting to illogical world, you know? And just having those techniques really helps when you're having that bad moment and being prepared.
Or setting alarms on your phone to practice them when you're not panicking can be helpful too, so that you can learn the skills in a non-emergency, so that they're there for you when you need them.
Yeah, because most panic moments only last for up to 20 minutes, but I think anybody that's ever had a panic attack would tell you that it feels like 20 hours. So it's one of those things that if you don't practice them, then it becomes harder and harder to get yourself out of that moment.
Absolutely.
I definitely agree with that. I can specifically recall so many like vivid, like I can feel the memories of different panics that I've had. They don't leave you. That feeling really stays with you. Another one that I had heard and I try occasionally is to dip my hands in ice water, because it's just like shock you out of your moment. Is that one that you ever suggest too?
Well, that's a good one. I haven't heard that one in particular, but I like it. I mean, it's kind of the same concept. You know, you're teaching your body to focus on the sensory inputs that it has, instead of focusing that mental energy on the what if thinking and that worst case scenario thinking. You're bringing yourself back to the present. Yeah. With extremely cold water. I like it.
It's, to be honest with you, I feel like when you're in a panic, if you know what works for you, it's great. And, you know, I've had people do this naming kind of thing, and it sounds so silly, but it really works well, where you think of like all the fruits you can name. So you start getting a panic and you're like, okay, I'm going to name fruits. And so you're like bananas, apples, oranges, peaches, like just what you can name. And then you move on to something else, vegetables, or someone I have that I've worked with for a while does like TV show characters and things like that, because it kind of calms her down, because that's what she likes. So just something to change your mindset is really what I would say, because telling yourself to stop it doesn't ever really stop it, that I've ever noticed. So I think that having a technique or having something prepared really helps.
Thank you. Thanks so much for mentioning those. On this topic of just like dealing with during these times in isolation, and also having people you can reach out to, I just wanted to share something that I have done or occasionally do, or also wish that I would do more, which is I make a list of people who say like, if you need me, message me. Like I actually have like a little list on my phone when I'm freaking out completely and I'm positive that no one likes me and I'm alone forever, and like I have a list because I forget in those moments when I am feeling really scared and alone that there are people waiting to hear from me, because I've decided to likes me.
That's an excellent idea. That's an excellent idea. One thing that we do with people who are in an extreme mental health crisis is we help create for them a safety plan. And it doesn't sound like that's exactly what you're talking about, but having a written plan for what you may do. What are the things that help me feel better? When I'm in an emergency situation, I might not be able to remember those things so easily. So what are the things that help me feel better? Who can I reach out to? And then I think we'll talk more at the end of the session about, you know, if it's needed emergency mental health help, what's available nationally and what's available in the community.
And I think it's not talked about frequently, but it is normal to have what people call like a depressive episode, where most of the time you're okay, but you just have a really bad couple of times. You know, it might be like a month, or it might be a couple months. And sometimes we have had to help people make those plans, and then they're fine after that couple of months because something changed, something happened. So having that list for people of people they can talk to or things they can do that help them feel better, because when you're in that kind of darkness of depression, it's really easy to just sit there, you know, and be in it. And that might be not getting out of bed, and that might be not showering and not doing anything at all. And that's when we want to make sure people have a plan. Is, you know, so it starts small, but it can turn into something larger that can be more devastating to a person, you know?
Yes. Hilariously enough, Naythan, you're actually on my list of people I check in on him. Like, how are you doing when I'm freaking out? Just because caring about others makes me feel a bit better. I'd like to go ahead and move on to a new fresh question. obviously Tallgrass, we're doing this, we're trying to create a safe space for our filmmakers to come and be, and to have this feeling of safety and security and community. That way, if they are having mental health crisis, we're opening up and trying to say, hey, we're here for you. Here's what we're trying to do to create something. In other institutions, such as the workplace and stuff, do you have any suggestions for ways that they could help their employees or their community combat mental health?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that this panel is an excellent example of that. I mean, just having frank, open, honest discussions about our feelings, to normalize, like I said before, mental health struggles. I mean, everyone is going to have a mental health struggle at some point in their life, a longer one, a shorter one, different severities, but everyone is going to struggle with mental health sometimes. Fortunately, our culture is coming around to the realization of this, and to more frank and more open and honest discussion. It can honestly be improved in most realms. And I think that discussions like this one are an excellent way of doing it. I think that just promoting an organizational culture where it's okay to talk about these things and you can bring it up and feel supported.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times, you know, you think about someone in a meeting is upset or kind of cranky or snappy or something like that. You know, is that normal for them? Is that a change in their behavior? What about instead of, you know, punishing them or being like, that was ridiculous, what if we said, are you okay? You know, that would be a different world, I think. And I think we're getting there. You know, I really do. I feel like Ben and I have been in behavioral health for a while now. And I think when we first started, it was, you know, the thing you kind of brushed under the rug. And now people are putting cute little memes all over Facebook. And I'm like, oh, that's great. But I don't think we always practice it at our workplace, which is a big change. You know, what if someone came in and was cranky and we said, are you okay? Mm-hmm. Or, you know, the opposite. Sometimes actually when people are very depressed and they seem all of a sudden very happy, that could be a big change for that person. So that's what we kind of look for when we're looking for how people are feeling, is a change from their normal behavior and checking in. And, you know, it might be that you have to ask someone a question that's uncomfortable, like, are you thinking about killing yourself? Are you thinking about death? Are you feeling really down lately? Have you been able to do anything you enjoy doing? And following up with help with that question. And I think we're going to talk a little bit more about that later, but I think those are the important things to do in a culture that respects the individuals that work there and respects each other. And I think we're getting there. And I think this project is a big step too.
And I, just to add, I think that for artists, it's hard because sometimes you have artists that are like freelance workers. And so for instance, they don't have that organization. And I think that's when projects like this is so important, because a lot of work has changed into becoming a lot of freelance work. And so what can organizations that are, you know, supposed to be community building oriented or have engagement with public interests, what can they do to further help those people that are contributing to their organization or community? And it's exactly that. It's exactly normalizing the fact that everyone deals with this and that it's an okay thing. And what we're providing a place where it is normalized to a sense where they can feel safe and comfortable to be okay and be themselves, because this is very much a part of who people are, and it's something that you know, should be met with support. And so yeah.
I'd say just a quick thought on if you are a business owner, if you're in that position that you're a boss and you have to be a leader and you are giving guidance. In my experience, having really amazing employers, I have a really good set of people who have kind of set an example for me, but they've said like, hey, are you okay? Is everything okay? They just constantly are checking in and constantly saying, is everything okay? And I'm a very honest person. So I'm always like, no, nothing's okay. And they'll go, what can we do? How can we help? And, you know, like, we're here for you. And knowing and becoming that way where you care more about the person than the other things, you know, putting them first and letting them know being heard, they're being seen, and you're here to help. I think has been, for me, my entire life, has been the most helpful thing, is knowing that you're not just suffering alone, but people notice and know and are here to help.
Yeah, and you're very right. You know, actually in healthcare, and I'm sure other realms too, but engaged employees, people that are engaged in their work, end up that way by being involved in the community of their work. So I'm sure it's probably the same for filmmakers too. You know, being engaged in your employees' lives helps them be more engaged in their work and actually makes them better at what they do. So I think the project that you're starting will actually even make the films that come out of Wichita better, because people will be able to have so much more connection.
One of the big things for me, especially as an introvert, is getting involved with other artists and working with other crews and other filmmakers has been huge for just the social aspect, because especially with the film, you spend a lot of time together. So many of my adult relationships the last several years have been directly tied to people that I've met on set, you know, and it's just like building that bond, and that does in turn affect the art that you create, especially with film being a collaborative medium, that having that friendship and that support structure within it is also important, because in the midst of doing something stressful like, you know, film or a film race, it's you're more likely to encounter issues with things like anxiety and depression. That was on a shoot where my uncle was participating and he had a seizure on set, you know, and so it was like the producer and I, you know, had this discussion as far as like, okay, so how do we handle the film crew, you know, whom several of those people, and myself included, knew, you know, and like, what do we do moving forward? And we were in the midst of this film race where we had this deadline, and so we had to deal with this in the midst of the normal film work sort of thing. It's like, how do we handle the emotional integrity of everybody on set and how people process things differently? And, you know, if some people are comfortable coming forward and saying that they're having issues or that they're upset with something, and other people are less inclined to do so. So it's also kind of being able to learn your friends and how they deal with things, and then being able to approach them in a manner that's constructive when they're in the midst of having or dealing with some sort of difficulty.
Definitely, having been on set for one of your productions, you guys really do create a safe space and environment where I feel like at the beginning of everything you say you're heard, let us know if you have any questions, here's our guidelines for how you treat each other, and we don't take, you know, any bad behavior. So I do feel very like safe, and I feel like you guys are doing exactly like setting the example for that. So good job. Kylie.
Yeah, I would just kind of like reiterate what Delilah was saying. I have never been an employer, but I have definitely been an employee. And it makes a huge difference when you work for people that actually care about their people. You enjoy your job, life is easier, you enjoy going to work. And if you enjoy what most people do for most of their day, then in turn, your life is just going to be a little bit easier. So I think it is important, as you know, if I was to give advice to any employers out there, care about your people, care about them, check in, ask them how they're doing, especially now when most people's jobs are different. I am an educator, and my world looks completely different than it has ever before. And I think it's important for us to check in on our people. I did have a question to follow up on artists and stuff. Why is it important to build a community whenever you're an artist? Like I said, I'm an educator, and I work with other educators. I don't work as an artist, so I don't understand what it's really like to have to freelance and work on your own. So I don't know if maybe one of you guys had to answer that. Why is it important to do that?
I can definitely answer that. I think the main thing is, you know, you need a space where people can come together and just basically ask each other like ideas and questions and sort of you know, pass around what you're thinking, your creative mind, exercising that. It's something that's very important. And I think that's something that when we had our meetings, Nick was very someone that people leaned on for that creative process. And that's why community is so important, I think, for artists, is that you know, in the collaboration aspect, you really do need people. I think, I mean, to create a film, you need your crew, you need your cast, you need all these different people. And, you know, talking about the work environment, you need that work environment to be freeing and to have a safe space within it. And so to further go on, you know, there's a lot of things that I think for artists, you know, you deal with so much because you're not only constantly thinking about your occupation, it's something that is more so a part of your identity. Because I think for a lot of artists, it's different where you can say that you're a dentist. It's more so like you're an artist. This is who you are. You're expressing a piece of who you are, and that's something that's very vulnerable. And so you need that community to be there for you and support you. But also your work creates community and creates conversation and creates love and all of these different things that I think is really important. And something that Tallgrass does, created this amazing community of Wichita filmmakers to come together and actually see each other and realize who we were and really, you know, further go out there and network and all these other things that, you know, might not necessarily be a mental health thing, but maybe it's this thing that can get you that next job or get you whatever it is. And so there's a lot of reasons why community is so important, but at the heart of it is that connection of humanity and all of that.
For me, having a community, especially as a creator, is extremely important to me because I could call my friends and tell them the issues I'm having with this project, but they're not really going to understand or make me feel like I'm not wasting their time with my words. And as somebody who's down on themselves a lot and has surprisingly low self-esteem, guys, I am constantly thinking that everything I do is horrible. But having somebody that's coming from the same perspective as you, that's experiencing the same doubts, or having someone to say, hey, I'm struggling, but can we talk about the thing we love? I'm struggling, but can you help me? I'm by myself here, but you're by yourself. So I feel like just having somebody who sees your perspective, or a group of somebodies that you can lean on and have those discussions with. And also that feeling of, I think it's like a type of adrenaline. They'll know what it really is. A serotonin boost whenever I get to have fulfilling conversations talking about the things that I'm passionate about and love. Kind of like this, you know, at the end of this panel, I'm going to feel amazing because we've really dug deep into something that I'm passionate about and I care about. And I feel like we're having a meaningful conversation. Those things fulfill me, and having that community and that resource that I can lean in on and not feel so alone, not feel isolated, is really, I think, vastly important. And I definitely think that our filmmaker community needs that an awful lot, even though I'm not.
I think it's your shared experience, you know. It's that shared lived experience of being an artist that's so different from other things. And I think, you know, like we go through it a lot too. Our spouses do completely different things than what we do. You know, my husband's an engineer. Ben's wife actually is an artist. So, I mean, it's one of those things where I think that lived experience, when we go home at the end of the day and we talk to our spouses, it's just different because they don't do exactly what you do. It's not that they don't care and they can't empathize with what you do. It's just different. It's different. And having that connection to the people that care and love what you care and love about is so important.
Yep, I'll hop in. I mean, I think the one weird thing which you guys have kind of touched on is a lot of artists use art as a means of expression and a means of processing some of the difficulty that they experience. So for me, it's directly that, like, it's something that has become a big coping mechanism for me. So if I'm struggling with something, the way that I kind of work through that and process it is by channeling it into creating something that allows me to take that energy that at times just feels insurmountable and then kind of focus it in, you know, kind of like a laser. So you're taking that wider beam and then focusing it in on something specific that allows you to explore those feelings and then communicate something that when we engage with art, it's some of that comes through, right? So for me, another huge aspect is music. So there's that emotional resonance within the piece that you're taking something that you've felt, that you've processed, you're encapsulating that in your own experience and the thing that you create. And then by putting that out in the world, there's a piece of that other people can engage with. And often achieve some sort of solace or peace of mind or connection with, that I think is a huge part of being an artist. So building that community is also integral, both in creating the art, but then having a community that gets to experience that art and engage with it. And then you get to communicate with as well. So there's that kind of cyclical nature of things within the artist community.
Yeah. And you meant, like, what you said was amazing, and put it, into like complete. I think that, art can be a tool to actually actively combat mental health. And a lot of people can use it as a way of therapy, adjacent to their own therapy. And so what you mentioned, like music, I think we all listen to music to make us happy, to make us laugh, to make us whatever, feel a certain way. And so, watch different movies or whatever. And for me, films are like what, helps me, and just like further learn about other people. And so that the idea that art is an actual like piece of tool to combat this is also something that is, I find interesting.
I feel like we're having some really good talks, guys. Thanks for sticking in here and being here for this talk. I was wondering, since we have you guys here, the knowledge havers, could you go ahead and just real quick, I know you're going to probably also drop it in the information, but could you tell us about different resources you have that we have available to us here in Wichita, Kansas?
Yeah, we sure can. I want a shirt that says knowledge haver, though. That's fabulous.
All right.
There are a lot. Go ahead, sorry. There are a lot of different resources in Wichita, actually, and Ben and I have been lucky enough to work with many of the people that work here at these resources. So we'll definitely share some. I do want to highlight a couple. I'm sure Ben probably wants to highlight a couple too. And if we left you off, I'm very sorry, because there are so many things in Wichita that are really great and helpful to this population. The first one that is really important is the Crisis Center, which is part of ComCare, which is part of the county. So it is open to anyone. It's 24/7 open. It's on 635 North Main Street in Wichita. And their number is 660-7500. So 316-660-7500. Walk in if you're having a bad day. Most people that are in that building are having the worst day of their life, except for the people that work there, hopefully. But it is one of the best known places in Wichita to go to get crisis help. Great people that work there. There's therapists. Their goal is to help you continue on your path. So they are not going to just throw you right in the hospital. That's a secret that a lot of people don't know and aren't aware of. They're going to try to help you stay in the least restrictive place that they can. So if you're feeling down, sad, depressed, even if you want to die, it does not mean that you will have to go to the hospital. Because a lot of people won't walk in those doors or call that number because they think that the police are going to come to their house or someone's going to force them to go to the hospital, which I don't think is normally the case. And I think that's really important.
I think the other main thing that I would highlight is the National Suicide Prevention Hotline. And we will post that number up, I'm told, at the end of this presentation. But it's another service that's available 24/7 every day of the year. You can call there, you can talk to someone if you're having thoughts about suicide, and they can both talk you through what you're going through, but then also direct you to sources of local help when necessary. So it's another really great resource. And I was told that at the end of this, you'll also be able to see this information in print. So keep that in mind.
Yeah. The other thing I would always suggest is places that do behavioral health in the community. Of course, Hunter is one of them, but there are some other FQHCs in town as well that do behavioral health concurrently with your physical health appointments. So Grace Med and also Health Corps do behavioral health in their primary care clinics as well. So looking towards having a healthcare provider that does that. There may be others in the community that I'm not naming, but looking for that when you're looking for a primary care provider, someone that understands that your mind and your body are well connected.
And the other thing to keep in mind is in a mental health emergency, like any other kind of medical emergency, the emergency room is also an option. So in lots of smaller communities, there may not be a specific mental health center. There may not be access to 24/7 mental health care except for in the emergency room. So keep that in mind for yourselves or for anyone that you care about that might be going through a mental health emergency. The ER is an access point to care as well.
And the other thing I would just briefly say, besides resources in our community, is a lot of time people will be very afraid. Earlier in this discussion, we were talking about, looking for people having major changes or being very different from how they normally are as a sign that someone might be thinking about dying by suicide. It is also okay to ask someone if they are thinking about dying. It sounds scary, but I promise you it gets easier if you think about it, and sometimes you have to practice actually saying it before you say it to that person. But asking that question, and then if they were to say yes, knowing what you might do, which might be calling ComCare Crisis, it might be taking them to the ER, it might be sitting with them until you guys can figure out a plan to get a mental health professional in to help them, but not leaving them alone, know? So it is a scary question to ask, but it's very important. And having a follow-up to if they say yes, because people think that if you don't ask it, maybe then they won't think about it. There's actually studies that say if you ask someone if they're thinking about dying, it does not prompt them to think about dying because you asked them. So it doesn't make them worse.
And this also touches upon something that I think all of you guys said earlier in your examples, which is fostering that sense of community and wanting to reach out to other people. And, just keep in mind, when you're reaching out to them, you're just letting them know that you care.
Right.
You don't have to have the answer. You're just letting them know that you are there for them, and you can help them get to someone that can help them stay safe. You can help them get to someone who can help them with depression or anxiety treatment. You don't have to have the answer for everything that they're going through. You're
Right.
just reaching out to them to let them know that you care and that you are a source of support in their network, which is awesome. And that's an awesome thing to feel from someone. And you don't need to feel that pressure on you that I've got to have the answers if this person tells me they're depressed or they're suicidal. You can point them in the right direction.
Yeah, I know often just communicating the difficulty can have a therapeutic value.
Right.
So just talking about it, even if there is no good wisdom imparted from the listener, that just speaking about it can be a bit of a pressure relief valve.
I do find that I use social media for everything, but often just even if it's kind of shouting out to the void, putting it in words, putting it out there, even if no one reads it or responds, or I delete it right after, but that moment where I've said it, hey, I'm not doing well. Today was hard. I'm not okay. Having made it very clear and put it out there, that typically does the venting or the emotional release that I need. And it's useful for me. It's maybe annoying for anyone who has to read it, but just instantly doing it automatically makes me feel like I'm not alone.
Yeah, and you don't have to have the answer to the problem. I think a lot of times we feel like when someone tells us something that's heavy, we have to have that answer. And I don't think you do. I really think people just exactly what you said. Sometimes they just need someone to listen. I think about myself. Sometimes I'll have a rough day or a busy day. And then at the end of it, I'll be like, wow, that was a really rough day. And here's why. But I don't need someone to solve it for me because I love what I do. I just wanted to say it was a rough day, right? I mean, it's just how it is. And yeah, Kylie, did you have something that?
Yeah, I just wanted to also share, like Delilah said, it may be annoying for everybody else, but I think it's important to know what works for you. And Delilah, if it works for you to share your whole feelings on Facebook, then share them. You need to do what you know helps you, regardless of how other people may feel about it. Because at the end of the day, what matters is that you feel okay. And it is okay just to feel okay.
I have found through other people who also struggle and stuff that they've often appreciated my honesty and my transparency about it, because as coming off as a extroverted, happy person who has no cares in the world and is typically the positive light in the room, for people to understand, like, that's just a thing I do, you know. It's just it might be the way I sound and look and act. It's not all real. So just being very transparent about all of my emotions, I think, is good for me, because I feel like no one will know if I don't tell them, and I want people to know my struggles, because I like being heard and understood.
Yeah.
And I agree with that completely. You know, I've known you for many years, and you are very bubbly and outgoing. And as an outsider looking in, you wouldn't know that you're struggling. And I think that's another thing about Nick as well, is he was very transparent about his feelings, and it may have made some people uncomfortable because he was very out there, and, you know, he put it out in creative ways, usually not just straight up saying it. But I think it is important to let people know how you feel, and don't be ashamed or nervous or scared to let people know how you feel. So I think it's great, Delilah, that you do that you are transparent about how you feel.
I think it's the only way to give people a chance to know you better, and to also connect, or to meet you here too. Like, hey, me too. Hang in there. So Naythan, you kind of had a hard question we were talking about earlier. Do you want to ask that question? Do you want to have a little discussion on that? Because I think that one needs to be said.
Sure. I mean, it kind of segues nicely with what we just talked about. I mean, Nick was a brilliant guy, and I really respected his intelligence. And he, for me, was often someone that I would go to for advice when I was struggling with something. I found that his mind most closely resembled my own, and I often looked to him as for the logical analysis of the emotional aspect, which is often hard for me to reconcile. So I encountered some difficulty in losing him, both as that support, but also assuming, I mean, I guess to be brutally honest, I would have assumed that, like, of the two of us, it would have been me doing this, not him. And it's been really hard for me in the grieving process to see him not make it through. And I was wondering if you guys had any sort of advice for those of us going through that aspect of grief and losing somebody that we both leaned on, but also, I mean, it's like the Chris Cornell, Chester Bennington kind of thing, where, you know, it's like somebody that you assumed was stronger than yourself, and then how that reflects on your own capacity to deal with those things.
Yeah, I think, first of all, one thing that we, meaning our community and, you know, even our nation, I think do a lot is act like dying by suicide is somehow different than dying. And I'm not so sure that it is for the people that are still here after someone dies. There's still the same grieving process. There's still that celebration of their life. And I think sometimes that gets overshadowed by how people feel about that situation, which isn't fair. You know, it's not fair to the people that are left behind who are grieving the same way had that person have died any other way. So that's one thing I think that we need to work on as a community is, and I think the first thing was changing how the label that we give that. You know, I call it death by suicide. Maybe in 10 years, it'll change to be something even better than that. But, you know, that's a major change, you know, in our society, is making sure that people understand that that can happen. And I think the other thing that happens is that loss, or that kind of left behind feeling that you get from having a person that you so deeply connected with being gone. And I think that happens same, whether or not it was a death by suicide or if that person had died a different way. And I think being able to talk about that and being able to talk about what that loss means for your own personal behavioral health is so important and so important. And I think, you know, Ben and I kind of mentioned it earlier, but I think it's so important. I wish everyone in their life had a, you know, a year of therapy so they could talk about the things that they want to talk about with a person that is trained to do that. But I know that's not possible in our current state. But being able to acknowledge what you can and being able to work through some of those things. Do you have, yeah.
Yeah, and, you know, speaking to survivors of any death, a certain amount of survivor's guilt is usually pretty common. And Yeah, I think you can't pathologize the grieving process in terms of like, I think that lots of times in our current kind of way of looking at it, grief, especially grief that becomes complicated or prolonged, gets labeled as a mental illness when it's a normal part of life, and an unfortunate and very hard part of life, but also a normal part of life. And so, but grief can become complicated and difficult, especially in people who are already experiencing depression or anxiety. And so when we think about someone that we lost, you know, I encourage people who have lost people in this way to think of, you know, not just that loss and the situation that surrounded it, but also of all the strength that they got from that person earlier in their life.
Yeah.
You know, what strengths do you carry on that he may have taught you? What lessons do you carry on that he may have taught you? The sum total of that person is not how their life ended, but you know, it's more, how did they live their life? What was important to them? What did they pass on?
Yeah, and I think, you know, I think it was Delilah who had mentioned earlier that there's something about getting support from people that understand you, that understand the same experiences you have had. And for that reason, I think it's really important to connect to people that have also lost someone who died by suicide, which there are some support groups in Wichita. I'm sure other places as well have them. You know, it's almost the same, you know, when my grandmother died of cancer, I started volunteering with one of the local cancer organizations and met a lot of people whose parents had, you know, died by cancer that had affected them. It's so important to share that lived experience with people that have lived that experience too, because now you have a community of people who understand and who understand what you're going through and can help you manage that how you will. And I think the Brown Project is one way that you guys have decided this is how we're going to honor him in order to help us grieve and to honor him, which is really vitally important to feeling better.
Yeah, it was very wonderful getting to hear all the people that were very close to Nick just talk about Nick, but also, you know, come together and figure out what Wichita can do, because there is always a tomorrow, and that tomorrow is going to be one that we honor and cherish Nick and celebrate his life, because he was an amazing human and creative and artist. And that is all with the people that loved and were with Nick. That's always going to be with them, and he's always going to be with them. And so the beautiful thing about the Brown Project is that the database that we will be creating will be a place where that can always be there. And anything, any component will be something that, you know, Nick is giving to our community.
Yeah, I totally agree.
So on that, how will people be able to access the database? What will that look like?
So actually, we're planning to actually include it after this panel as a pop-up submission that will happen. And so anyone in the Wichita area who is interested in an equipment database, but also a mentorship component and building a community, Tallgrass is actually going to be creating this database for us to further create this community, because the main theme that we had through this discussion was community. And that's something, you know, that we want to do, and Tallgrass wants to further do in this particular area as well. But also just, you know, we're in a crazy time right now. I mean, we need community, you know, we need people, you know. I think sometimes we forget that love does exist, but there is love, and we all have a lot of love to give and a lot of support to give. And so that's what we want to do. But also, you know, if you want to make a film, we want there to be a place for you to have access to be able to find other creatives and artists, because that's something that Nick, you know, did for kids like me when I was in high school and I wanted to learn how to make films. I got, you know, blending the equipment or being on sets or me PAing, you know, and that's something that, you know, more kids need to get, especially right now in this time. And so I think, you know, this is a wonderful way to honor him through what he did best.
What a good discussion, guys. I'm so happy that we had this time together to discuss and then to learn more about the Brown Project. Thank you so much, Kate, for forging that for us and making that something that exists in our community. We're so thankful for it, and Tallgrass is so honored to be a part of it and to kind of help carry that torch with you guys. Ben and Kaitlin, thank you so much for being with us today. This is a hard conversation, and without real knowledge of the situation, knowledge of mental health and those resources, we wouldn't be able to have a full, complete circle of knowledge and conversation and discussion. So I'm very thankful that you were here with us today. Naythan, thank you for being here moderating and the Zoom, and also stepping up as a filmmaker and a friend of Nick's to be with us today and to share your thoughts and feelings and to be vulnerable with all of us today. And Kylie, I've known Kylie since she was little, so I'm so happy that you are here too. And I know that you've been doing a lot of research on mental health and suicide and stuff. So I've really been enjoying watching your pages, your Instagram or your Facebook stuff, because I've really been getting a lot from it, and really appreciating that you've been sharing and learning and growing with us. Would anybody like to add on to anything before we kind of close up the discussion?
I would just like to add that, the Brown Project was definitely created through a collective of individuals, and we'll make sure to list all those individuals that were close to Nick and the filmmakers, and Kylie was such a huge part of it, and what we all came to do and the decision process of it, we concluded to this project, and I think it's a wonderful thing. So yeah.
I just want to say thank you again, Kate, for including me from the beginning. I am not in Wichita, Kansas. I am very far away, so it feels nice to be included in something that honors Nick when I'm so far away from my home and my family. And I think it's important for me to feel included. And like Delilah said, I've been doing a lot of research, and I feel very called to educate and do things regarding mental health, because a lot of people just don't know, including myself. So I'm happy to be here.
Thank you guys so much. Once again, this entire panel and discussion is to honor Nick Brown, who was a remarkable filmmaker, friend to me, musician, bandmate to so many people, mentor to so many, and a really remarkable human with infinite skill and ability. And through this, we will be able to forge on and continue to remember and spread all the knowledge that he gave us all. So, thank you guys for being with us today. We really appreciate your time. And if you need me, send me a message. Any filmmakers or anyone who's watching this panel that's like, I need somebody, I think that any of us you can message, and then follow up with the links, get a therapist, get it out of you. All right, well, thank you guys so much, and have a great Tallgrass Film Festival.